Call to order the workshop, March 30th of the Charlestown Town Council. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Madam Deputy Clerk.
Councilor Morris.
Here.
Councilor Sloan.
Here.
Councilor Stokes.
Here.
Van Slyke.
Here.
Martin.
Here. Okay, this is a workshop. So what we are going to do, we have some special invited guests from both the town of Portsmouth and also John Gagne from West Philly Planning Board here this evening. So this is a workshop forum. The council's not taking any votes. We're just going to go through each item and we'll discuss those. Our next council meeting is Monday, April 13th. So any input from this or resolutions that we decide to draft, we will vote on at that date. All right, so the first item for our workshop, actually, before we begin, I'd like to invite our Portsmouth guests to come to the podium and just introduce yourself so everybody knows who you are. And also, John, if you'd also like to get up and just one at a time, let us know who you are. We appreciate you taking the trip down here too.
No problem. I'm David Gleason. I live in Portsmouth, Rhode Island. I'm the vice president of the current council. I have served a previous 6 years. I was off for 4, and this will be 4 more years. So maybe 2 more after that. Maybe we can change things, maybe retire, but you know, Karen was in politics. This is my wife, Karen. She took the ride with me tonight. She got me started in this. She was on the school committee and the town council. So we're trying to make changes in Portsmouth and trying to keep it the rural town that it really is. And as you know, we have people upstate that are trying to make that difficult for us. So just as an intro here, I initially approached this by coming to our council and asking them to support me on a resolution for a moratorium. Well, House Chair Shekarski has tied this thing up so much that the resolution would be all of 2 months at best. And I'm thinking, how am I going to get anywhere with that? So we actually started talking amongst ourselves at that council meeting about looking for an injunction. I can't say that's where we're going to end up, but you've seen our resolution and we're hoping to get other towns to support us, similar towns that have the same type of rural areas that they want to maintain and, you know, create and support their own laws on. We have 9 now at this point, I believe.
Yes.
9 towns together, and I think there's a couple more. So our target was 10, and we hope to do something. I'm going to bring it to the council in April with a definite plan on where we would like to go and invite others to join us. So thank you for inviting me to this meeting, and if you have any questions and I can add anything to this, feel free to ask.
We will, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Larry Fitzmaurice. I'm not a member of government in Portsmouth, but I am head of the taxpayer group, Portsmouth Concerned Citizens. And we're involved in this, but in this matter, I speak hopefully only for the council at their direction, which may be a little difficult, but I'm trying. So I've been going around the state, talking to councils like yourselves. And as Mr. Gleason said, there are now 9 councils which have formally adopted the resolution first put forward by Portsmouth. The Portsmouth solicitors did a pretty good job on this thing, and we had some help from private attorneys as well. So they worked hard on it. It's a good piece of work. I like it, and I didn't have much to do with writing it. So, but it's a good piece of work, and it summarizes very well the points that we'd like to make. And when my time comes, I have some remarks to make, and I'll make them in about 3 minutes worth, and you can ask me questions as you want.
Thank you. Mr. Gagne?
Well, I know some of you. I've served with some of you, sort of. When I was a town councilor next door in Westerly. We're all kind of a small community down here. So I appreciate the invite. I wrote a email to, and happy to copy Councilor Stokes on it. I think by now you all would have received a copy of that email through from Counselor Stokes.
Yeah,
So
so it
it's
came
in your
out
inbox, don't worry
this
about it.
evening, but the town clerk does have it, so it'll come out and it'll be entered into the record.
So
for us.
my background is I started in this affordable housing actually working with Mr. Penny's organization, Habitat. I was vice president of the board of Habitat. Helped to build housing in your town, in Westerly, and in Richmond. And in 1991, the legislature passed a law and said that we had to get X amount of affordable housing. And Westerly passed its ordinance. I was on the original commission for that helped, the committee that helped to draft that ordinance for the town of Westerly. Westerly is one of the only towns that has a 99-year deed restriction. Our view was that if you built a place, you have developers coming in, they're getting density bonuses. 30 years was gonna be up in no time, so we have 99 years. And no one's balked at that. It was modeled on Habitat's model. So I'm on the planning board now. Like I said, served, I'm vice chair of the planning board, so in the last couple of years, we've approved 130 units of affordable housing in our town. You've got some documents in front of you, so you might want to refer to them as the evening goes on with different speakers. But this is a comparison of 2024 to 2014 numbers. Congratulations, Charlestown, you're up 90%, over 90%. Wesley's up 23.5%. This next document is again from RIMFAC, I call it RIMFAC, that's how far back I go. Rhode Island Housing, which outlines those that are in the pipeline by community. And then the last page is a spreadsheet. I developed a spreadsheet when I was with Habitat, and I was the chair of the Family Selection Committee. It had to do with income levels. And on this spreadsheet is the latest 2025 numbers from HUD. So these are the income guidelines. Typically, home ownership will range at 100 to 120% or 80%. But I think it's really important that, like, facts are a stubborn thing. And it's important to have the facts when we have these discussions. And too often, when we have a discussion about affordable housing, some in our opposition have an idea in their head. But if I told you that a family of 3 at 100% median income in Washington County, they have a household income of $111,400. They have $33,420 annually for their housing. So they have $27.85. That's 30% of their income that would be available to in housing. Those numbers, I think, would shock some folks, but it's important that we get the facts and that people have it. So I offer this up as a sort of context that I wanted you to have that, and I'd ask that it be entered into the record. And the last box down here is the average construction cost. So you can see what the numbers are: 275, 450. Inland on the coast, 500, and really 800 is just a guess. And I got those figures from Chubb Insurance, who was working with a client in South Kingstown. But I'm coming to you with some information and some experience on this issue. It's an important issue, and we have to solve it. But we can only solve it. I'm glad to see you have collaboration. Number one, by working together. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, do we have any other people from Portsmouth here that I missed? No, seeing none. Okay, so council, the actual agenda item reads, consideration of collaborating with other municipalities, with the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns, and with our representatives in the General Assembly. So I did invite our representative Spears, who is coming. She said she would be a couple minutes late. Lane Morgan told me she would be here this evening, and I did not hear from Victoria Gu, Senator Gu. So they were invited, but Representative Spears is on her way. All right, so it says with representatives in the General Assembly regarding reversing or amending legislation that has eroded municipal authority over land use and housing decisions, with particular consideration given to issues raised in resolutions received from Tiverton and Portsmouth, and potentially signing the joint municipal statement. So one of the reasons we were inviting our senators and representatives were to find solutions to the affordable housing problem. We all know we have a problem. Senator Gu is arriving. Welcome, Senator Gu. You are right on time. We were just talking about the first item on our agenda. And like I said, our approach is to work with our senators and representatives, so that way we can find solutions that benefit the community, but also help solve the problem. So thank you for coming, and I know Representative Spears is on her way as well. We have representatives here from Portsmouth and also John Gagne from Westerly. We just gave them a few minutes to speak. Did you want to say anything before we get into this, or would you like to wait? I don't want to put you on the
Yeah,
spot.
I'm just looking forward to hearing from folks and hopefully we'll have some action items to take away from it. The only thing I would add is that since we're in the middle of session, the only thing we can do right now is recommend amendments to things that have already been introduced. So,
Thank you. All right, so the, on packet page 11, we have the resolution, actually packet page 10, my mistake, the resolution from the town of Tiverton. And in there, they give specifics to Tiverton, like, for example, the second whereas the Tiverton Planning Department currently has 5 comprehensive permit applications pending and other plans in various stages. And the next few whereases are all in relation to that. So earlier today, I asked our town planner, Sean Henry. Sean, where did you go? Oh, Sean, you moved. Would you mind coming to the podium and just sharing the information that you gave earlier today with regards to the numbers that we have? And welcome this evening, Mr. Henry.
Thank you. Sean Henry, Town Planner. Thank you for having me. So, hearing the commentary from other communities, I did look into our files to see what we have currently sort of in the works before us. I do not have any comprehensive, and speaking specifically to comprehensive permits, I do not have any comprehensive permit applications in hand currently. That isn't to say that another number of projects aren't being considered. There have been pre-applications over the past several years of sort of initial informal meetings with Planning Commission, public meetings. So there have been ideas that have been out there, but they've sort of been withdrawn and revised. So I don't want to, there was one a couple of years ago that was 416 units. That was no longer in consideration, so I don't want to bring that before you tonight. But the only one that's really, I would say, seriously on the horizon is a 50-unit comprehensive permit that I'm expecting pretty soon in the near future. So we don't have the volume necessarily from the comprehensive permits that other communities are having. But I would say that we do share in their concerns about local control, issues with refining of laws and regulations. And really, our community does not have the infrastructure, wastewater, sewage, transportation, transit, or water resources that other communities have. So that's sort of the situation that we find ourselves in, is that we're sort of held to the same standard as every other community in the state, yet without those resources that other communities may have. So I have other opinions. I could keep talking, but I'm going to refrain for now. But I just want to give you sort of the lay of the land with comprehensive permits. We don't have the same volume that Tiverton, Exeter, and West Greenwich other communities have, but we do have some.
Thank you. Does anyone have, and the council have any questions for Mr. Henry while he's standing at the podium? That way he doesn't have to keep jumping up and down.
Yeah, I'll be here all night.
No one at this time? Thank you. All right, so council, without reading this, because nobody wants to sit here and listen to me read this evening, I think if we are to adopt something like this, the second, third, fourth, and fifth whereas will need to be tailored to Charlestown based on the input from Mr. Henry. But I think the resolved is where we need to concentrate a little bit. So the first, now therefore be it resolved, it says that the town council respectfully requests the Rhode Island General Assembly and the governor reinstate required findings for denial in the Low and Moderate Income Housing Act. And then it's at Title 45, Chapter 53. Attorney Brochu, can you give us a little information on required findings for denial for everyone's knowledge?
Well, I mean, that would be specifically on if the proposed development, for example, doesn't adhere to the comprehensive plan.
Oh, microphone. Thank you.
Proposed development doesn't adhere to the comprehensive plan. And it'll be other factors as determined by the planning commission here. I'm sure the planner could elaborate on specifics, but every project is going to be evaluated on its own merits.
And so with the changes in state law, that requirement was recently removed, correct?
I believe it was.
Yes. And we're required to make findings of fact and approval, aren't we, at this point?
Yes.
Those are, yeah.
Okay, all right, so this resolve then goes on to say, and to enact a law providing that for purposes of calculating a municipality's progress towards the 10% affordable housing goal, affordable units shall be counted at the issuance of a building permit. So what they're saying is rather than waiting till it's actually constructed, that it gets counted when the building permit is submitted. All right, or issued, I should say, my mistake. Be it further resolved that the town council respectfully requests the respective city and town councils of Rhode Island join in this request to have the General Assembly enact legislation to restore required findings for denial and to count affordable units when a building permit is issued. So that's the general crux of this resolution. Any questions or comments from the council?
There are others in the municipal statement that,
That's coming up later.
great, okay.
That's the third item on our agenda, or the fourth, I think. Or do we lump this in with this one? We might have lumped it all in. I think we lumped it in. Did you want to discuss the joint municipal statement at this time?
Well, I think that kind of gets to the meat of the matter.
I was wondering if we could do the Portsmouth
Yep. we can
resolution
certainly-
first
okay.
and then
Sure.
hit the joint, because I feel like the Portsmouth one kind of encompasses
It does.
very detailed, what we're talking about here.
Okay, so that is on packet page 14. And again, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the meat of this one comes in the third whereas. And this one says, whereas recent legislative changes were made to those general laws, the 2025 affordable housing laws, including but not limited to those pertaining to, and its mandated permitting of accessory dwelling units, positioning abandoned properties for redevelopment, removing controls on procedures for approvals from permitting authorities, limiting local zoning laws regulating affordable housing developments, restricting wetland zoning regulations as applied to housing development, limiting local control of applications for home construction, and undercounting mobile homes that serve as affordable housing. So, Mr. Henry, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to come back up. Of course. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, and if you don't have any of this information offhand, that's perfectly fine. But the first one says mandated permitting of accessory dwelling units. Do you have any idea how many actual permits we've received for accessory dwelling?
No,
units?
that's not handled by the planning department.
Zoning?
That's permitted by building and zoning. I didn't gather any ADU statistics, prior to
Okay.
tonight's workshop, but.
Yeah, like I said, didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
So that's information, Mr. Allen. Can we get that from our building and zoning official? All right, then there was positioning abandoned properties for redevelopment, again, zoning. Or do you have any information on that? Really nothing?
The town administrator and I were speaking about this earlier today. I don't believe the town has any buildings or properties that have potential for any housing development. So in terms of abandoned properties, we don't have any. Much of the town's land is dedicated for conservation purposes. So that's kind of the first step of, well, Housing 2030, which is later on the agenda, tells municipalities, go find properties in your town that you control, that you can develop it, and we don't really have any of those.
All right, the third one was removing controls on procedures for approvals from permitting authorities. Limiting local zoning laws regulating affordable housing developments. Restricting wetland zoning regulations as applied to housing developments. Limiting local control of applications for home construction. And undercounting mobile homes that serve as affordable housing. Do you have any information on any of those you would like to share?
I would just say, I don't want to dig too deeply into the definition of the word affordable, but the word affordable has very specific meaning under state law, under the Low Moderate Income Housing Act. There are strings attached, a deed restriction to the word affordable. So when we are talking colloquially about housing being affordable, we mean that in the general sense, but under the law has a very specific definition. So that's why, it's likely why mobile homes don't count towards the 10% affordable number, because that only encompasses the narrow definition of deed restricted units that have been approved under the LMI and Jack. So I would just, the word affordable is very difficult to understand what someone means when they say it. So I use the word capital A affordable when I'm talking about that act. So I would just eye towards this, watch out for that word affordable, and just where it is applied and how it is applied, whether it's generally or specifically in the definition.
Thank you. Counselor Stokes?
Sure. I guess my question would be, would it be fair to say that the last several rounds, we'll say, of legislation that has come out and some future pending legislation has seriously changed the landscape and impeded our ability as a local municipality to control the shape and the look of what we're doing with our housing developments from past to now, especially in regards to these comprehensive style permits?
I would say that that's accurate. There have been changes really over the past, I'd say 4 to 5 sessions since 2022 is when it sort of started accelerating that. So we, administrative officer, as referred to into the, Subdivision Enabling Act, the Planning Commission as the planning authority, we have to apply the state laws as they're written. And what they're doing is they're changing the way that they're written, changing definitions. So we have to apply it as written in order to, we're applying the law legally. We have to follow the law. So yes, things have been changing definitions, changing processes. Things that used to go before the board are now being done administratively. Everything is being done on a shorter timetable. You used to have 65 days, now it's down to 45, in some cases down to 25. So the real procedurally, yes, a lot has changed around it. I don't know the resolutions that you're considering are addressing last year's changes, legislative changes. There are bills that are in session now that are under consideration that will change things further. So this is kind of a moving target in that we're addressing last year's changes, and there are things happening now that we will also need to address or at least discuss. So I would just be careful that we're not moving to a place and now are settled there. It is moving again underneath our feet as we speak.
So if there was one, from a planning perspective, for our ability to control what our community is shaped and how we plan and how we develop, from a planning perspective, what would you say is the largest thing that has, if there is one thing, the largest thing that has removed our ability that we can then express this to our legislative delegates to say, this needs to change. We need to have this. Like, if there's one or two things that are very specific that has really reshaped how we plan and what's for our community from a planning perspective.
I appreciate the question, but I don't think I could point to one specific issue or change, because it's been dozens of bills over several years, and some things have been revised again and again, especially ADUs. I'm thinking about have been revised, I think 2 or 3 times now. So I would just say that, and this is just my opinion, the acceleration of legislative changes that affect zoning and subdivision enabling. There have been bills that I would characterize them as poorly constructed in how they're worded and what they authorize, and that in some cases are granting special dispensation for certain activities or activities that meet certain criteria. So I would say that it's really the quality of legislation coming out of the General Assembly is what I would point to, is that. And I testified up there last week before House Judiciary on a bill, the technical amendments bill that they're changing this year. And this is what I said to them, is that I don't know what the intention of these changes are, and what their intent is when they draft these, that they hope the result will be. So, not knowing what the intention or what their expectation of how it will be when it happens, when it, is codified. I would just say that we're not having, I think, great communication between the municipalities and the legislature. It would seem that a lot of these ideas are sort of being taken up there and then decided up there without being filtered back to the towns, back to the communities, and then back to the legislature. So I don't know what the intent is of these changes, nor what the expectation will be as a result of them. So it's not really one thing, it's really just the process generally the past several years has been, we're gonna change this year, and we're not gonna tell you what our intent is, but we're gonna hope it works out. And you gotta update your zoning ordinance, you gotta update your subdivision regulations, and you're gonna do this from now on without a real clear picture of what the goal is. Because they'll push on housing affordability on one thing and then mandate, prevailing wages on a project of a certain size. Well, you're making it cheaper over here and more expensive over here. So there's a lot of different ideas that are being fed through. I don't know where they're coming from, what the overarching goal is.
So, it seems from, this meeting and then obviously the past several years where we've been adjusting our ordinances and things that have come through the pike and as you've come on, it seems like from my perspective, one of our largest concerns is our density development. Because of our groundwater, because of our septics, because of the way our town is structured, it seems like some of these that have been passed, obviously the comprehensive permit being one of the largest, yes, it does have an affordability component, but it's these bonuses and these density changes that are going to cause a future problem if they're not already impacting us, because of the way we're structured. We've carefully structured our density and our subdivisions to plan for our resources and how our community is laid out. But it would appear that this is, in my opinion, changing that significantly in a lot of cases. And again, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I want to make sure I understand this. But not only is it changing that in some significant ways with these yield bonuses that have existed for some of these comprehensive permits, but it's also, from a perspective, I know we talk about this 10%, it's been there for a very long time. But it's also literally going backwards on the 10%, which just makes no sense. I mean, it would be one thing if they said, hey, we're going to give these yield bonuses, but it's got to be 100% affordable development. But we understand that's not possible because the developer's not going to develop 100% affordable development because they can't afford to.
There are nonprofit developers that will do 100% affordable units.
But they don't come down here.
Projects. Well, what the issue is, they're not as competitive on pricing when they're looking at parcels. So when we're talking about good planning practices being, you want to develop where you've already got development, so you're not creating a very dense development in the middle of nowhere where you now have to run a new bus route, new services that's very expensive. They're not going to be competitive. Let me back up. Comprehensive permits, it has been around for a long time. They've mandated density bonuses of 3 units per acre blanket. Senator Good's bill does work to add some nuance to that in the groundwater protection areas. I don't know if that has much chance of passage this session, but it's good. It's a good start. But briefly, I'll just agree with you. The mechanics of the Low Moderate Income Housing Act do not work when you have developers that have a product that they create, a single family house that they create, the private developers, and they know that they can come in at a very high density in an area that's not zoned for it. All they have to do is commit 25% of the housing stock to affordable units, and then they can come in at an income level that they're comfortable with, usually 100 to 120% of the local median income. So it's very little cost to them to get a very dense development in places where the town didn't necessarily intend for it. And you're right, with 75% of that total project going to market rate housing, you're actually moving backwards on your 10% affordable goal, which I mentioned affordable. That 10% number only includes those affordable, very specific units. So we're not talking about market rate housing that is generally affordable, but the mechanics of the law don't really seem to be internally consistent. So I think that if the legislature wants to do anything bold on, housing production, we need larger ideas than nips and tucks and subdivisions. It's really, it requires the whole model to change, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. So two of the
Thank you.
takeaways I got from what you said. Number one, we need to look at the density bonus percentage because the 25%, as we say, is only pushing us backwards instead. And one of the other things that kind of the underlying thing is put the brakes on. You know, let's see how the laws that have already been enacted impact the communities and what effect they have on the affordable housing before we go making more changes. And as you said at the very beginning, it's like a moving target, trying to get to where we need to be. But when all the components keep changing, there's no continuity to find out what changes are actually having an impact and what is not.
I agree 100%. That's one of, I am the legislative co-chair of, co-chair of the legislative committee for the American Planning Association. So Planners Association that I track legislation. And one of the things that we talked about and was a priority for this year was that there is no data being collected on all the changes that have been made over the past several years. So there's no real sense of what works and what doesn't, and we're continuing to change things without finding out what works and what doesn't. So I agree with you 100%.
I was just taking what you said.
Then I agree with myself. Any other questions?
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Henry? No, thank you. You'll be back up. And I just
Yeah,
want to
sure.
point out for the record that Representative Spears has joined the meeting, so welcome Representative Spears. All right. Anyone else from the council at this time? So we do have the Portsmouth resolution in front of us with those particulars. And we also have the Tiverton resolution. So council, what are your thoughts? Again, this is a workshop, you know, we're not taking any votes, but what are your thoughts for moving forward on this? Counselor Stokes.
No, I was actually curious if I know the vice president of Portsmouth had spoken a little bit in the beginning, but I was wondering if maybe we can get a little bit of a deep dive of what they're seeing as their largest issues, and how that's affecting them and where you're really stumbling and looking for that support, that may translate to us as well. You know, I'm sure we have some different demographics and some different zoning styles, but
I guess the biggest difference I can think of, building wise are you folks have well water. We have water out on the street. They're all from low-lying reservoirs, and there are concerns that we might not have enough water to go around. I'm told that that's not a situation. But when you asked the question about the biggest concern, what went to my, I thought about it, and density is what my biggest concern is. We have several projects ongoing already that we've missed the boat on. We can't go backwards because they've already been approved, and the same type of situations. One is, small area that has four unit condos on it, and 25% will be used for low to moderate income housing. The others are built by a company that specializes in the low to moderate income housing, so they look at federal money to help support them, okay? They look for block grants, things of that nature. So I don't think there's that many in Rhode Island that do that, specialties. I think the way that has been set up upstate is to try and get more of your typical contractors to get involved in building these projects, They're still gonna put money in their pocket, and like you say, the numbers keep going here and they keep coming back. But our approach, I guess, at this point is we can't do much about what we have. When I started going down the road of moratorium, I wanted to start and look at our comp plan. I don't know if our comp plan says I can put all the low to moderate income housing all right here. We have the whole rest of the town, so you might want to consider if that's going to affect your town. Do you want them all in one spot, or do you think they should be spread out through your town? Right now we have 3 bridges to get off the island. The new proposals, we have a 54 unit house that's going to be opening up this month, actually. And then there are 2 20 and 20, so 40 units here, all within a quarter of a mile, Then there's another 24 down the street, and then another 40. So these are all concentrated in one area of town. So that was my initial concern was, are we accounting for this? I don't know if I've answered your question on that, but the density is the biggest issue. I don't know that other parts of the town are, prime candidates for this. because price of about an acre of land is just outrageous to begin with, you know? But the rules have made it so it's practical for a contractor to go in there and do his low to moderate income housing thing. As your planner said, one of the biggest things that we see is the definition of affordable housing. We have probably 350 mobile homes in town. We get, from what I understand, half a point towards that for each one, because they're not on their own individual lots. In other words, there's 50 units here, they're owned by a corporation. So we don't get the credit for that. We have Section 8 houses that don't qualify. We have senior housing that don't qualify because of the stigma of, stipulation of what LMI housing is. You know what I mean? And some of the LMI, the ramifications I don't think people think of is if I get this low to moderate income housing, everybody's paying 750 and I get one for 400 or 450. When I go to sell it, I can't get much more than that. There's no equity growth in that property. You know what I mean? I look at it as the house I live in now. It's my starter home and it's my finish home, So I think that's a limitation to this whole process as well that people don't think of. Our philosophy is we think these rules, your planner put it very well. I think that they've set up all these rules without looking at what the final outlook's gonna look like. To promote more housing. We definitely need more housing. We're not against low to moderate income housing. We chase people, that come into town under previous, in the last 5 or 10 years. We have large, high dollar developments in town. And they say, all right, 10%, or I think 10 units are gonna be low to moderate housing for a Carnegie Abbey, we call it. It's a big tower. They have yet to build those. This is 20 years later. They're still waiting to find a piece of affordable property to put those on. That's what they've done in town. There's another 200 house units. Their only obligation is 7 LMI houses. And we remind them, okay, they've got 2 of them now, but it doesn't fit well. There's so many complications. I think if we all look at our town, I think the biggest thing that affects us and affects the planners is it takes the ability to have the town that you want because somebody else has told you what they want it to be. How do we get something different now? We're kind of trying to reverse engineer this thing. And our thought is that if we have, more towns that band together with us, we may have a shot at it. We got to try and do something.
Thank you. We do have go ahead, Mr. Henry.
Yeah. So I can give you a couple of real life experiences from the planning board in Westerly. So we have one project, 72 units, and you mentioned, oh, by the way, I have to compliment your planner. He's good.
Prepared, yes.
He's very well prepared. He was very factual. Great.
We're lucky to have him.
Hold on.
No, don't say that. I know Wesley's hiring a.
Budget, we have,
You're gonna stay right there, sir.
So listen, here's the thing. We're building right now on Wells, and I'm sure Wesley Hospital, that's Wells Street, corner of Franklin, there's a farm back there. Farm is gonna be gone. That farm is being done by a large nonprofit developer. I'm glad you mentioned that. So they're gonna put 72 units in there. The project cost is $28 million for 72 units. That's $388,000 per apartment. All of them that's great news. That developer is pulling out a fee of $2.5 million. So this isn't your local builders, but it's gonna be a great project and it got approved by the planning board, not a problem. Habitat had a great project and I really encourage you to work with Habitat as much as possible. If you have town-owned land, work with them. They're 100% affordable. It helps your numbers. Your planner's 100% right. You approve these comp permits, they're put in for for-profit developers. This law has been in place for a while. But now they're stripping planning boards of their ability to stop something bad. Now, I'm looking at beautiful pictures of your pond. We share a pond. We had Winnipon Pond, and we were faced with the golf course disappearing and comp permits with 2,600 units on the golf course, some of which were in the RI storm tools. If you use that from URI, you'll see some of which would have 14 feet of water in the event of a, a storm and a foot of climate change, sea level rise. Horrific, right? Where was the sewage gonna go? The state of Rhode Island, by their own definition, said that that pond was past, Winnapock Pond is developed beyond carrying capacity of the pond. It's home to an oyster farm. People cohog from it, okay? So what we're faced with Rhode Island, and I can't agree more, I think the General Assembly has the best intentions, but they don't have solid information. Most of the state of Rhode Island drinks from the Situate Reservoir. We drink from the ground. Westerly can produce top end, like 7.1 million gallons of water a day to water our town. In fact, when we were on the councils together,
Yeah.
we did a visit to Quanacatog because they're having a challenge in Quanacatog and they wanted westerly water to be able to get there. But at the time, Paul Carina and the town manager did not feel we had enough capacity. We're hitting 6.3, 6.4 in the summertime, and in the wintertime drops way down. So there are restrictions down here that you have. On the density, if you're gonna have density, you may wanna consider having an ordinance in place that says, yeah, you can do a density, but you're gonna see, and because we've seen it already before our planning board, common leach fields that are shared by multiple septic systems. They have to be managed as a solid system. Our planning board insists upon that. I'd like to see our town council pass an ordinance that requires it. But what you have is multiple septic tanks. If someone doesn't maintain their septic tank properly, it can follow a leach field. And in our case, if you look at a GIS map of Westerly and of your town, you're gonna see water everywhere. You're gonna see aquifer protection areas everywhere. And it's mostly north, it's not south, because all that water just goes into the ocean. But under the new law, stripping a planning board the ability to deny, we denied 2,600 units on 5 points. They went to the judge. The judge upheld it on 5 points. All 5 points that the planning board made to protect the environment, to protect the community, to protect safety with regard to the development. All of it was upheld by the courts. General Assembly's taking it away. And I don't think they're doing it purposefully. They have a really good goal. But we all, like I said earlier, facts are stubborn things. We've increased our in the last 10 years in Westerly over 20%. We've increased. You guys have gone 95%, or 93%, which is amazing, based on the handout that you had there that I gave you. And that's all from Rhode Island Housing. So facts are stubborn things. This law, in various forms, has been in place since 1991. It's failed. Now, we can accept that it's failed and make adjustments, but what the legislature has done, and your planner is spot on, since 2022, it's gotten more and more draconian, more and more stripping the communities. Do you think that the General Assembly is sitting there and saying, well, if Charlestown has polluted water, it's not a problem? It's not their intention. But again, they're drinking from the Situate Reservoir. You're looking at a guy who used to live in Central Falls. My wife was born in Central Falls. I lived there for 10 years. A lot of money was spent by the state of Rhode Island to restore the Blackstone River Valley and to clean the river up, the Blackstone River up. What we don't want to have is our environment be in that situation. So I think they've got to give the tools. They've got to give the tools for us. So I strongly encourage you to support Portsmouth's resolution, and I hope Westerly does. It's going to have it on a future agenda because, again, it's not the intention. It's not the intention. It is. We have to all work together, and the legislature has to work with us. And its rules, especially in the last two sessions, seem to be more and more undemocratic. They're more and more authoritarian. They're more and more, we're the state of Rhode Island, we're telling you what to do, Charlestown or Westerly, et cetera. And there are limits here. By the way, Jamestown, out of water. They don't do any more hookups. In Westerly, if you want to hook up, our sewer plant is just about out. We have about 500 hookups. 130 of them are gonna go, potentially, not 130, but 72 of them are gonna go away when that project on Wells Street opens up. So you have to get certified that you can get a hookup to the sewer plant, because guess what? We're under a consent agreement with Rhode Island DEM to upgrade our sewer plant, which we're doing to the tune of $85 million. And will not gain any additional capacity. It is all water quality. So we can't pit development and good things against our environment, and we gotta do a better job. So those were two real world examples where we could do things, stop something, and we won't be able to. My solicitor had the discussion. We don't think we'd be able to do it now if all this legislation passes.
Jean,
Thank you.
so what I'm hearing that you said is when you turned down that 2,600
Yeah.
unit development, you were allowed to have,
We're allowed to have a finding of facts,
yeah,
which
against
said
it.
which
Yeah.
is saying why we could turn it down.
Right, and that's not allowed under the new legislation.
It looks like it's gonna be seriously diminished, if not completely eliminated.
That's what I thought I heard. Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Penny, did you want to get up?
I'd just like to
As
clarify.
our Habitat for Humanity
I
representative.
appreciate it. So Colin Penny, I'm the executive director of Habitat for Humanity. We are 1.3 miles down the road and always happy to help out. Again, I work with our legislator, Senator Gu, Rep. Spears, Rep. Cotter often. We've never been asked by the town on our opinion, but we have a lot of expertise at our office 1.3 miles down the road. We are a new owner of 7 acres here in Charlestown with the intention of doing a comp permit of, I think we could do 36 units by right. So figure out wells and septics, probably won't get to that number. But that is our intention. I had a great conversation with your planner about 6 months ago when we were looking at purchasing that property. So there is interest, and Habitat's very, very interested. No one likes to drive in Rhode Island, and our office is right here. I would say the system worked with the golf course project. It was put under the comp permit as it stands now. There's been one or two minor tweaks, but nothing that would have changed. And looking at the legislation that's currently been proposed, that project would still be turned down and it was upheld by the courts. And I think that shows that the system has some safeguards. Part of the reason that we're in the situation that we are in today is there was no consistent rules. So you had towns that were more welcoming, typically in our urban areas, building at higher density. And then we're concentrating low-income communities in certain school districts and certain things. That's not what you want for a healthy community. We had 8 potential projects here in Charlestown that we failed to get through and were turned down either a preliminary or through the process with the planning board over the past 15 years that I have records of. So we stopped building here. We have like 9 houses scattered around, single family, but it wasn't worth for me to invest $500,000 in a piece of land if there's no consistent rule set that says, yes, you're going to be able to build, or no, you're not. And I think that was the challenge. John Gagnier mentioned that, 1991, we saw it again in 1996, 2008, and then kind of more recently with kind of the state coming down and saying the towns haven't figured this out. They've had since 1991 to say, how are we going to develop responsibly with density in certain areas that make sense with our sewer capacity, with our water capacity, with groundwater, with environmental concerns, conservation concerns. And there was just no consistency. We saw a project in Lincoln that sat in some degree of fight for 14 years. And with the new process, they refiled, went through. It's something that was a good project, was available. 14 years, millions of dollars spent at the courts. So I think we really have to look at the balance. I do agree it was a little bit of a gut reaction at the legislative to dump everything all at once. And housing was popular, so everyone was a housing expert really, really quickly, both in the towns, in the state, and nationally. But I think just saying we got to go back to where we were or just saying a blanket stop isn't going to help. If you look in Charlestown, I think the median sale price 2 years ago was $640,000. How many of the folks who work in this building can afford a $640,000 home? My guess is very, very few, if any. And we have an aging population working for our towns, the folks who are out plowing our streets in this snowstorm. How are you going to attract new folks? I don't think you want to pass a budget paying almost $200,000 for somebody running the plow, because that's what it costs to buy a home here in Charlestown. So there is a balancing act. I agree that I would love to see more development with higher percentages of affordability. That's why we do 100% for a for-profit developer. If you do 100%, you know, I'm losing $10 million on my project in Westerly. It's not a great business model, but we do it because we're mission driven. So you do have to have some balance on what's appropriate. Again, the groundwater is tricky. I think just blanketing GA or GAA is not the best solution. My background's actually in geology, and that doesn't mean anything when it comes to, are the wells going to go dry? What is the water quality? It is a factor of many. So I think we really need to look at some more precision in the legislation. Again, I think that's where we don't want to propose legislation that would just stop building I think on the House side, I think it would stop building in 94% of the state. I think if you look at GA and GAA on the Senate side, I think with just one of those categories, it's about 30% of the landmass of the state. And some of that has water, you know, so I think we have to be careful on both sides of these things. But it's been a challenge for a very long time. Again, there was a reason we didn't develop in the town that we exist in, because we would have gone bankrupt. We saw nonprofit developers, we saw for-profit developers going bankrupt because of the lack of predictability. You know, I felt comfortable with the new permit investing $1.35 million on that project in Westerly, and we still haven't put a hole in the ground. And neighbors are challenging, which they're allowed to do through the system. We're very confident because the rules are set that we will prevail, but it would have been irresponsible for me to invest $1.35 million of both state and donor money on something that was a coin flip if it would have made it through the planning board. And it's not consistent. It was never consistent across the state. You know, we have, you know, some towns that were just absolutely don't build anything near anyone. We saw what happened in Narragansett, where they just changed all the laws to make it more difficult to respond. And you started getting into this back and forth that wasn't good for anybody. So I think as you're looking at these resolutions, joining with the towns, I think it's a lot more complicated than a moratorium. I think the idea of saying that it's at building permits a bad idea, because again, there's other folks who are investing millions of dollars, and it's going to be a race to the lowest common denominator to get your bad project in first, rather than spending the time to develop a high quality project where everybody's at the same set of rules. So I think that's could be an unseen consequence of making it effective at the time of the building permit, because you're going to have some developers racing and not doing their due diligence as well as they should do to develop a good project just to get their building permit pulled to beat the other developer they know is investing funds in resources.
Thank you, Mr. Penny. That puts things in perspective. It's unfortunate that 8 projects were turned down in Charlestown because, as this council has repeatedly said, we support affordable housing and we would love to see something
I would
come
be
forward.
concerned.
So let me finish.
Yeah.
So I hope that you will continue to work, you know, with the town, and, you know, the council is here as a resource if you need us.
Wonderful.
I would be interested to learn what those projects were, because I don't recall that happening.
Okay, yeah, I can go back. Again, it was all before I was here. I've been here about 9 years.
Yeah.
So we haven't done anything since then. Again, I kind of looked back at the history and saw that a number of projects were turned down, and there were towns that were more welcoming, to be honest. So, yeah.
So with you have a considerable amount of experience with this. So how can we figure something out to craft? We want affordable units and we want targeted development. You know, we want to have controlled growth, but we do want growth. But what do you think some of the best safeguards for us from a developmental standpoint, especially when we're looking at the concerns of the water and the septics? Is it things where within the development we can do, you know, joint treatment systems, or we can have, you know, specific ways that we're looking, how are we protecting that, especially density wise? Or is it something we can spread out in pockets over a larger area that's not so dense in one area, which is then concentrating, especially when it comes to our wastewater side? You know,
yeah, I mean, the
what do you
quickest way
guys
is to
do
get to your
work?
10% and you get a lot of control back. But I think, you know, a lot of it has the town looking at town-owned property. So the town of Narragansett is looking at every town-owned property, has put out RFPs for some of those. And so looking at ways that the town could partner on development, you get a lot more say on what happens if you own the underlying land, gives you a lot more controls. And it's a good way to get to that 10%. Again, the population in Charlestown is what, 8,500? So you don't have quite the same challenge that say Westerly does, which is significantly higher. And so that number can be more challenging to get to. More difficult. So, I think trying to figure out and work with your planner, zoning officials, your affordable housing committee, hopefully that'll get back up and zooming along. I know one of my board members is hopefully joining, is getting roped in. You just moved to town, and just really looking at what resources you have and prioritizing areas of development. Is it funding? I know you still have a small amount still in the housing bond. Is it worth floating another housing bond that would invest in areas to promote that building in the areas that you feel, both from an environmental, from a traffic flow, away from, pocketing it so it's not all in one area. Look at the school district, what makes sense for school bus routes, all that sort of stuff, and making it work. Again, Sharrow's a great school district. We partner. We had students building Habitat houses in Hopkinton, and they're building houses at Westerly right now, and I'm sure they'll be building on Ross Hill when we get that project going. So it's really about the partnership and the open communication. I think there's just so much pushback, and I've only been here 9 years. So, when you get that pushback, you just go on to the next project and you kind of put your hands up because we have limited resources. So that partnership, that communication, and those sort of things. Nancy Latondra was the planner in Westerly. We had a great relationship. It's one of the reasons that we started to work. We're now talking to her in Jamestown because she's there now. It was a great resource, knows these laws inside and out. And so it's about that partnership. And if you can develop that with both for-profit and nonprofit developers, the uncertainty in the time to develop is huge. So if a for-profit developer says, tell me where you want me to invest my money to build, and we'll support you, they're going to jump on that because holding costs, permitting costs, engineering, time delays. Every time I show up to a planning board meeting, it costs me about $5,800, $6,000 to be there with attorneys and engineers. So it's not just the nonprofit developers. There's some great for-profit developers that do and are willing to do more affordable units. And I think it's just looking at what you have, where you want to prioritize it, and moving from there.
And one of the things a few years ago, we started looking at town-owned properties and where we could possibly put some housing, because that is one of the biggest barriers is the cost of the land. And as we know here in Charleston, it just keeps going up. So, we're happy to partner with you and find something where we can make something work.
And I would say, really look at the Narragansett tribal community. They're one of the largest landowners in town, and they have, as any demographic in Rhode Island, have the lowest rate of home ownership. I've talked to many folks who their healthcare is here, their community is here. They want to stay and end up moving to the more urban areas because they just can't afford to stay in the community that's so important to them. Finding ways, and there's a lot of federal programs to support housing through USDA on tribal lands and with tribal communities, some great loan products to build. I know there's a lot of bad history out on Kings Factory Road on an abandoned project that's just 12 rotting houses. So I think really seeing if there's an opportunity, because that's an area that would both serve a need to a community that's very important. And they already have a lot of the resources when it comes to land, some big water aquifers, those sort of things. So I would really encourage dialogue if it hasn't already happened, but really expediting that, because I think that's a great way to develop responsibly.
Thank you.
Yep.
Can I ask you just, I'm not trying to push back,
Yeah.
but I did work on the comprehensive plan that we wrote. And I did not see 9 or 8, whatever, projects that were declined. There were some that failed for other reasons.
Sure.
But I would be very interested to learn what those projects were and why they were, if they were declined, why they were.
Sure, yeah, no, I'll definitely look into it again. It's what I was told when I started, and I have a bunch of files on designs and those sort of things. And I know it wasn't all comp permit, but again, when you don't have consistent rules, when you're seeing projects getting turned down, not turned down for different reasons, And with an elected planning board, sometimes you have more or less turnover. So you could be in the middle of a project, the planning board flips, and it's a whole lot of other opinions, which can be very challenging. I know that's something held very strongly here in Charlestown, not going to try to change your ways, but it can be a barrier from a developer standpoint.
Thank you.
So if you would get that to me, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I got,
Mr. Stokes?
yeah, one more for you. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
You're here, so.
Yeah.
So we've mentioned it before, and I've been a proponent of this, is redeveloping some of the existing structures. For instance, the motels that we have that are really not in that vein of what they once were in the 70s and 80s, and they would be full, but these are projects is that something Habitat does? Do you do redevelopments?
I tried to buy one. They're privately owned.
Yeah,
Some
yeah.
folks are harder to work with than others. I know the Crystal Penguin was purchased. It's all for profit. I think they're like 300 square feet and go for $1,800 a month, which is cheaper than market. But, I know we would absolutely, in particularly with some of the adaptive reuse changes that have happened, we'd be happy to look at any existing structures. There are some state changes. I know some of the housing for unhoused youth that were in town ended up getting sold on the open market. And I think there's some changes at the state level that will allow affordable housing to be a priority there. I'm not sure if there's any more in town, but looking at some of those opportunities. But yeah, adaptive reuse, looking at motels, it's been done successfully by many habitats across the country, and we'd be happy to take a look at it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so to kind of wrap up what we discussed on this item, so the actual agenda item, consideration of collaborating with other municipalities, League of Cities and Towns, with our representatives in the General Assembly regarding reversing or amending legislation that has eroded municipal authority over land use and housing decisions, with particular consideration given to issues raised in resolutions received from Tiverton and Portsmouth. So what I'm hearing, and again, this is just a workshop, we're not taking any votes, but if I say anything that's incorrect, council, please, let me know. But things that I think we need to address in our own resolution for our April 13th meeting would be to request our legislators, and we do have two of them here this evening, to look at the change in the percentage required for density bonuses. I mean, as we stated, if we're going to get bonuses, then we might as well be working in a positive direction rather than in a negative direction. We're going to ask that they start collecting data on the changes that have been instituted to date. And perhaps, we'll say, put the brakes a little bit on new legislation until we can do some analysis of the impact of what has already been enacted. The definition of affordable housing should be looked at and reconsidered. I have a note that I can't really read. Should have equity and growth. There should be a balance, precision in legislation, so that way everybody knows what they're working with, and it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. My last note was actually more for Habitat, working with the town for properties. There was comments about the quality of the legislation rather than just the magnitude of the legislation. So not just that we're looking for a lot of legislation, but that what is actually being enacted is having the positive impact that it's supposed to have. That's what I've captured. And then I have, yeah, that's it. So what else do you have to add to that? Is there anything you disagree with that we could take? Senator Gu? Yep. Welcome this evening.
Thank you. I feel like I should address a bunch of things at once, and building on Penny's remarks. I think, for example, on the westerly projects in Winnapogue, those findings, for example, of it not matching the comprehensive plan, I agreed with in principle, and the court did agree with that. So at least in the way the state law was written at the time, I think it works for like a check and balance. I did have some concerns that language was kind of like diminished possibly in the last year, but this is, I really need like an attorney to really dive deeper into that. In some of the housing bills, from my perspective, some of them is saying that if the proposed development already matches the zoning, it matches every single requirement that you have, setbacks, etc. then it streamlines the process. Some of it dealt with administratively, which speaks to Colin's point, which is if you're taking a look at a piece of land, you say, according to the zoning, I can build this many units, and you're complying with zoning, you're complying with everything. But then you go to the town council or the planning board and they deny it and then drag it out for years, then it creates a lot of unpredictability. Anyway, so some of the bills I voted for, some of them I voted against. I think there's a real, sometimes it takes like a really good attorney to really understand it because these are really complicated bills. The Housing 2030 plan, I think should be mentioned as I think it sets more annual goals for growth. So
that's coming up
Yeah.
later on in the agenda.
okay, I can address that then. But
Can I quickly ask a question on the matching zoning? We have a number of areas that are developed beyond carrying capacity. So if you match that zoning, you're just making a bad problem worse.
well, then I would recommend revising the zoning.
Well, we can't. If somebody comes in with an ADU, it's by right. If somebody comes in with a comp permit, it's by right. It's very hard to defeat those proposals. You may not want to defeat some of them, but there's no discretion, I guess is the point.
I think the zoning is the purview of the town. Like if the underlying zoning is something that you.
They've blown away our underlining zoning.
Well, we can talk about that more offline. Counting, there have been some, in terms of counting affordable units, there have been some movement in that direction. The mobile homes that are owned by the tenants, or that it's basically incentivizing having mobile home parks where the people own the land underneath it. And that is something that was meant to encourage towns to, I guess, help with having the ownership on the underlying land. There have been some issues with mobile parks where they get bought out by some corporation and then they jack up the land prices, making it no longer affordable. So with counting ADUs, if they are rented to a tenant who is within that less than 80% median income, then if that tenant is considered in that bracket, it doesn't have to be deed restricted to be counted. Granted, it'll be counted as half a unit.
And Senator Gu, is that in legislation that's proposed in this session?
No, it's already in law the last few years. Another suggestion would be to approach the septic system issue a bit more with DEM, and I've had some conversation with them about if you have a large development and you have the cumulative loading of nitrogen from septic systems, and that's not really considered in their permitting process. They have said that they need more staffing or it requires some modeling expertise to figure out how much of an issue this is. But I think if we can approach it from more of a scientific perspective, I think we have a better shot of making the case, I think, from state about why the larger developments are an issue here. So.
Well, I guess it's lucky for us that we have quite a bit of modeling
Yeah.
as to why that's a
I did
problem.
talk to.
And DEM looking at it, from the perspective of this unit and only this unit and not taking into consideration the cumulative effects. I think we do have data and we do have modeling. So I think in those cases, especially specifically for us, I don't know Portsmouth, Wesley, I don't know what their situations are with their data, but, specifically for us, I think there needs to be provisions, or there should be provisions that the town has the ability to at least work with DEM to put this data forward and say, this needs to be considered, as opposed to basically, well, we preempt you and we're gonna case by case, yep, this house meets the requirements. Doesn't really matter that the next 10 houses next to it are pushing that entire area past the point of where it can be. And I don't think that's considered, every time we've had this discussion, it only seems to be getting worse, from that perspective. And, that's at least that point with the nitrogen loading specifically. But the other point too is, I just had a quick question for you while you were mentioning something about the mobile homes. Understood if somebody comes out and they jack up the rents and the prices. But I guess my question is the ones that aren't doing that and the mobile home parks that people can afford to live in and are living in, they do have low income. Why are we not counting those as low income properties? I mean, I understand the deed restrictions, I understand the parts, but that should go towards people that have low income are living there, they're surviving, they're able to live there. That should be counted towards it so people understand that there are affordable options. But it's not. And it seems like the push is to drive more and more development, which we want the affordable portions. We want to have a combination of that, but not at the expense of overdevelopment. And I think that is one of the biggest things, especially you should know more than anyone in this town coming from this area and represented. This town will happily fight tooth and nail amongst themselves about what is and is not appropriate development, more development, how we use land and how we don't. But I think fundamentally, it should be the towns that are able to have those conversations internally to say, this is how we'd like to see our community shaped. And by removing more and more and more of the control, it should not be completely closed out. I'll happily say, yes, absolutely, towns were too restrictive. But I think we have gotten a pendulum that the legislature has pushed now, which has become so much more open that you've swung too far in the other direction. You wanted to have a balance, and I think the best intentions, it was mentioned before, the best intentions, absolutely. You want to have a balance because you want clear, I know the gentleman from Habitat said it, clear, these are the rules, these are the standards. But I think what we've seen, and I think where we're getting this gripe, and I don't want to speak for Portsmouth or Westerly, but I think what it seems and what it tells me when 9 and potentially more and more communities are now signing on to this, it's saying, you've gone too far. You need to allow the towns to have the control that they can do. And I know you've mentioned this before and we've talked about, it's not simply a matter of just, well, we can just change the zoning. We can't. We're preemptive in a lot of places by the state of Rhode Island. Zoning is conferred down by the state. It's been that way since zoning has come in. They've granted, now they've taken it away. And so it's not as simple as just saying, hey, we'll just change the zoning of that area. I mean, if we were to do that and say this land's beyond carrying capacity, you can't build anymore, we would immediately find ourselves in a massive battle and lawsuits and litigation, and the state would come in and say, you can't do that. So it's not as easy as just saying, well, we'll just change the underlying zoning to it. We can't. And that is where the problem lies. In the areas that we do have these environmental concerns and these problems, which are real concerns, just as much as the need for housing is a real concern. We don't want to be in such a rush, or again, and I speak for myself, not the council, but we don't want to be in such a rush to jam all this into the towns that we then ruin what is already in existence for the people that are here, and we make a larger problem farther down the road that we could have approached. Has Charleston been restrictive in the past? Absolutely. I'll be the first one to tell you that for my time, and we are making strides, though. As these numbers reflect, you had a 93% increase in our affordable housing from 2014 to 2024, 93%. So we are making strides in the proper directions, but now in the last several years and several sessions, the legislation that has come out and the way we have had to change and catch up, zoning alone is an incredibly complicated issue. As you know, you said lawyers have to sit down and figure out, how do you think that plays when you get bill after bill after bill? We haven't even implemented the original changes, and now you get a new set of rules that's saying, well, you got to do this, this, and this. Half the time we don't even fully understand how those are going to apply. And then the applicants end up frustrated because you have a situation where it becomes a point of, well, we can't do anything because we're really not sure how do we apply this to you? And that's causing problems for it. So I think, at least from my perspective, what I would like to see and what I see here is you need to allow the towns to have some control remain that allows for them to say, okay, you need to do this, we understand, but we need to be able to work with these agencies like DEM and have some say over, you need to look at this as a totality situation here. We have a problem and you're making it worse. Allow us to have some type of say within those types of things. And again, that's specifically for us. You have sewers and water, and they have their own set of problems with those. So at least that, again, my perspective.
Could I make a comment? As far as the septic systems and whether they cause, they're a problem, I do believe that the Situate Reservoir Watershed Management Plan was based on a study to determine this. And the plan recommended that watershed towns prohibit high-density residential development. And high density was determined to be a high risk for pollution water quality. So you could actually look and explain to your fellow representatives and senators that there is this study, and that's what they found. So, and we have our own modeling, as Steve has talked about.
So on the zoning preemption, let's talk about that more maybe offline, because like, it's my understanding, minimum lot sizes, for example, have changed over the years and all that. So, on the modeling and DEM, yeah, I think there can be a lot more communication. I have talked to, for example, Matt Dowling about this. And I think since you guys have in Charleston a lot of expertise, it is something that we can leverage with DEM. And I think it's just a matter of trying to, get that expertise and implementing that in the DEM. And
I think that's a good suggestion.
All right, so, and we just to kind of wrap this all up, I think we're all in agreement, well, again, we're not voting since it's a workshop, but the consensus I'm hearing is that people are in agreement to do some sort of resolution incorporating these suggestions that I outlined earlier based on the input from those that spoke.
Yeah, I mean, my bottom line, it's definitely a catch-22. I mean, we need affordable housing. We know we have an aging population in Charlestown. We have to make it more attractive for young families. But at the same time, my big issue is losing complete control to the state and having them mandate things. I mean, I think that's the most frightening thing I can think of. So I agree that if we put these things in there and try and, claw back some control, if it's successful, we have to then put a kind of long-term plan together, working with Habitat or using town-owned properties or whatever the best solution is, which is not, it's gonna take some time. It's gonna take a lot of thought. But the control factor for me is number one.
Right.
I agree. And personally, I do think we should join in this municipal statement. I think that there should be discussion, and that's a good way to get it.
Counselor Slum?
Yeah, well, I would agree also. I like the Portsmouth resolution, I think hits a lot of key points that I think is, is similar to, some of the situations are similar to we have, certainly. Portsmouth is bigger than we have. I went over there yesterday to drive through the town, of 114 and Common Fence Point and Island Park and 138, and it's changed a lot since the 35 years that I lived there. And I drove by the mobile homes too a lot, and because I saw that you had mentioned that they're not counted as, or only a fraction are counted as, affordable housing, which is very troubling. Because I know you have a lot of units over there. Yeah. And I guess with South Kingstown, for example, I think they bought the people that own the trailers bought the property, and that changed their.
Well, there's one in town
housing.
that happened too.
Yeah. So.
Border Hill.
Let him finish.
So. Anyway, I would agree, we do need to find a way to take back some control and to kind of slow the process at the state level. And, hopefully we'll get the support from our senators and representatives up there. But that's how I'm feeling about it.
All right. So again, yep, Counselor Stokes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think this line, at least from my perspective, I think we should include, if not exactly this language, it kind of sums up what Counselor Marr was talking about, myself, Counselor Sloan, is the town of Portsmouth recognizes the statewide need for increased housing affordability and supports policies that promote housing opportunities while remaining consistent with constitutional home rule principles and municipal planning authority. I think that sums it up very nicely. This is a state that we constantly are talking about home rule charter, and how much the towns, I mean, we know there are 39 middle fiefdoms of Rhode Island, you know? Counties do things better than the entire state can do. But that has been ingrained in the fabric of the communities within not only Rhode Island, but New England as a whole. And I think that principle is being lost. And for my opinion, I think it absolutely needs to be clearly delineated in any resolution if we were to send it. That has to be known. We want our ability to have a say in how our towns are developed. Portsmouth wants to have an ability to say how their town is developed. And it's not my right to tell them how to do their business, and nor should it be the state of Rhode Island's right to tell Charlestown exactly how to do it. We want a seat at the table, and I think we're losing that. And I think that has to be very clear if we're gonna send something forward, at least in part. But the rest of it, I absolutely agree with what you're saying.
All right. So again, to wrap it up and move on to the next item, we will put this on our April 13th town council agenda for actual action. And I think based on the discussion and what will be reflected in the minutes, the solicitor will have a good background of what should be included in this based on what we said earlier. All right. All right, next item is consideration of support for House Bill 7446, introduced by Representative Megan Carter and Companion S 2691, introduced by Senator Victoria Gu, that eliminates mandated housing density bonuses for public drinking water supply, watershed groundwater. We actually did this resolution at our previous council meeting, so this item has been taken care of. and that resolution
What's the status of
Has
that
been
bill?
sent off.
We just heard it last week. I don't know the status of the house.
But it has been.
Has it gone forward or?
A bill is always.
Are our Portsmouth representatives leaving this evening? Feel free to sneak out, and thank you for coming.
Otherwise, you'll have to get a hotel. It's such
Yeah.
a long ride.
And Representative Spears, welcome this evening.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I can't speak to the exact outcome of the bill that you're speaking to, but I've spoken with Representative Carter, and she's working hard to get it in play. But I will echo that already exists in law. This is just making sure that there's a specific call out to that issue. So today, right now, water is protected. You have the right to protect your water supplies, period, in your development, and that's already part of DEM's regulations.
Thank you. All right, next we have consideration of Senate Bill 2275, introduced by Senator Gordon Rogers, that, and I quote, restores the requirement that a local review board issues findings for denial in reviewing a comprehensive permit request, and clarifies that affordable housing units shall be included in each town and city when the building permits for units are granted. All right, and this is on packet page 49.
I believe that's the same one that was just discussed with Tiverton, perhaps.
The, his is a little bit this is the Senate bill there, 2275. Yeah, so this is specifically his bill, which some of the language does go to what was in the previous resolution. But this agenda item is specific to the legislation itself. Anybody have any thoughts on this one? And I know this came up earlier, but that was mentioned about the difference between issuing when it's granted versus when it is applied for. I mean, when it is constructed.
Man, I'd like to say something on that real quick.
Yep, go ahead. You can go first and then just state your name for the record.
Well, I mean, it was, I'm at Wesley Town Council dealing with Petra, and that's something that I know you mentioned it, about a half hour ago. To Wesley, I don't think that's a factor at all. As a council, I wouldn't care about that because, as it pertains to the 10% mandate, we're never gonna get there. So I don't care where in the pipeline you're gonna count it. Count it when it's granted, count it when it's permitted. So I'm not really focused on that. To me, it's just to go back to the prior discussion, it's about, and I think John said, yeah, you have people who drink from the Situate Reservoir, and then you have people like Wesley and Charleston, and we're in a different demographic, and why we're all playing by the same set of rules. I know it isn't, I just wanted to say that from before, but that particular point about, when you wanna count things, you're never gonna get to the 10% mandate. What's the difference?
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, to counter that. No, I think it's an important, distinction. There's things that were in a town's control, and there are things that are outside of a town's control. Your planning board can approve things, and the state should be looking at that as the town cooperating toward their goals. Can't guarantee, for example, those 72 units I spoke of, they've been in place for a few years now. We just had to renew, they have the right to renew if they don't build within a certain period of time. We had to renew again for them on that because they've had trouble getting financing. Now, the intention is at some point or another, it will time out. But the towns are carrying these. They've done their part, they've approved, and, the goals would be, well, let's look at the number. The other factor here is I heard about mobile homes. Again, you have existing housing stock, and I'm interested in what Senator Gu said about the 60%, because when I was on the town council, our planner was leaving, Marilyn Shellman, longtime planner. She'd worked out the math on how many different units that we had. This deed restriction component is very, very destructive because no one who owns a house is going to deed restrict and devalue that asset. It just goes against basic law of economics. So on this one, with regard to approvals, yes. But I also ask you to go further at some point to think about putting a resolution together to encourage them to allow existing housing stock. Farm Fields and Open Space Program is a 10-year program.
Say it again. Say that one more time.
To use existing housing stock, to consider it existing housing stock. So under Farm Fields and Open Space, if I submit a plan, that is approved by Rhode Island DEM, okay, a forest plan, open plan for a field, for a farm, and it's approved. I come to the town, I give to the tax assessor, and my taxes are reduced on that piece of property. That model is a 10-year model. If I choose it diminishes over time. So I have to pay back, let's say year 2, I decide I want to sell my farm and I want to develop it. I have to pay back all that benefit that I got from the town, back to the town. But it would give you 10 years. So what it says is to the property owner, hey, here's 10 years that you're going to receive a benefit for helping folks out. It does not require a deed restriction, so it doesn't run into the economic problem of I want to discount my asset for 30 years. Okay, no one's going to do that. It's a different model that exists today and could be adapted for housing that would allow you to use some of existing housing stock. Again, this is a tough issue. If the issue is about helping people get into affordable units, existing housing stocks are away. When I was at the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns, there was a call for building 15,000 units across Rhode Island between now and I believe 2030. 15,000. We're the second most densely populated state in the union, right behind New Jersey. Daunting task. So is it about all new development? It's about all new building? It's about all new increased density? Or is it about solving a problem, making affordable housing available to people? So I'd encourage you, yes, I think that's a solid bill. Count, permitted. You've done your job at that point as a community.
So I'm just gonna go real quick. So I'm gonna actually disagree with you on that point because the goal is to actually create this affordable housing for people to
It is.
move into and live into. If it's counted towards the stock when the permit is granted, that, as you stated, that, property may never be built. It may never be,
Well, it
you know,
will time,
counted. Well, but we don't, you know, if the goal is to get people in affordable housing now, if we're, let's say we're at 10%, but we've only actually built 5%, we haven't really solved the problem. So it's like a problem we've solved on paper, but not in reality. Like that permit doesn't do any good to the person that's living in their car that doesn't have a home to go
but
to.
that permit will time out and that will free up that space.
But in the
It will,
time
for that time, man.
yeah.
Your
so
point's well
like I
taken.
said, I'm pushing back on you on that one.
Point
Counselor
well
Van
taken.
Slyke?
Um, could you explain a little bit on this?
On fields and open space?
Yeah,
Okay. So the goal here, and Rhode Island has a number of different goals.
well, I know what farm foreign, but how the housing component would work.
Because if, let's say
You
I
have an
a home,
existing house.
I have a two-family home
Yeah,
and I'm in a section of Charlestown, and I say, I got my apartment upstairs for $900 a month. It's a two-bedroom. That's affordable by any measure. Any of these trusts, that's affordable. Doesn't count. Does not count. Nobody knows about it. If you introduce it into a program where there's a certification process, where the town has it on record, you can match up properties with people that are in need to solve the problem that you pointed out, which would be a really solid thing. For the 10 years, what you really, the town's commitment to that, the town's contribution to that is a reduced tax rate on that property. Because it's an affordable unit. You know, it might be 50% of that property in the case of a two-family, but.
And many years ago, the Affordable Housing Commission had Charlestown's Affordable Housing Commission had considered
Proposed that,
something
yeah.
along that lines of modeling it like a farm forest and open space program. So that is something that we can revisit.
yeah,
Yeah,
so very
good
interesting.
idea.
Council Stokes?
I think the only, kind of to hit the middle of your 2 points, I think the only thing that really protects you by counting the units when those permits are issued, I think where it comes into play is it protects you from overdevelopment. Meaning, when you hit the 10% for communities that do, it significantly changes the structure of what the comprehensive permits can do.
Mhm.
Meaning, you gain a significant amount of, well, whether it's significant, you gain a measured amount of authority back for your future developments, because then you don't want to have an overdevelopment. So if some of these are, because of the timeout section component, you're absolutely right. It's not creating the housing, which we do need, but it is protecting to say, if you had, say you have 10 developments in the pipeline, and some of them may take a decade to do, you may actually hit, whether you do or not, you may hit that 10%. There's a possibility you could hit that number and then have all these projects that are still adding to housing stock when you don't necessarily need it at that point, or you've solved your problem, but now you're over because you're in that pipeline. So I don't know if it's, I don't know if this is exactly the way to solve that, but maybe the timeouts can change, or maybe some type of like, well, you get half a credit or something, some way to measure that to say, okay, when we do hit that, we don't want to overdevelop.
But are you saying that simply so that you gain control?
Well,
I
exactly,
mean,
so that we have the
but we're
ability
trying
to say.
we're trying to gain control anyway.
Well,
so-
exactly, so that's what I mean, so that would be the nature, that's where I see that piece, I'm not saying I think that legislation is good or bad, I think that's where that piece plays into it, is you gain back that control when
You know what you're doing.
Don't need me anymore. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Spears?
And then I see Chairwoman Rose wants to speak. So I wanted to build on what Steve was just saying is, really what governs, like, I think what Senator Gu was trying to say to this council is you do have zoning authority. You absolutely do. What limits you is the LMI overarching rule, which you haven't hit your target. The minute you hit your target, then you gain back more of your local control. It's because you're out of compliance with state law, right? That has existed since 1990. So they're hedging. That's why all of this is occurring, because we've all been out of compliance with that. So that's the efforts. I am not a housing expert or a zoning expert. I will never claim to be, but I know that that's the premise behind what occurred. But if you were to do an assessment, I'd be curious to know how many building permits were issued in Charlestown in the last couple of years? How many were affordable versus how many were not? I know for a fact that 42,000 single-family homes are seasonal homes in Rhode Island. So we're overly populated, but are we overly populated because they're full-year residents? I don't think so. If you turn those over, that would solve our housing crisis, right? So I think those are the questions and the information that we as a legislators representing your interests, the more information that we have from the towns that demonstrate, hey, we're making good progress. You know, we had 100 permits come in, 60% of them are affordable, 40% were not. We can make the case, look, they're trying to move in this direction. It helps us as legislators move that needle. But generally speaking, I agree with the gentleman that that's a strategy around how to gain your primary concern, which why you're all here. How do we get back leverage to make sure we're not getting overdeveloped? And then I heard a comment in the audience that you don't have control over your water and your rights for development. You absolutely do. I want to just dispel that notion that today, if you could prove, which is why that development down in Westerly didn't move forward, and if you could prove that you did not have adequate water or septic, 100%, you do not have to develop it. And I believe your solicitor could confirm that. State law today confirms that. But I understand that you guys are all concerned about this. We are here to champion your interests. But there are levers that you can use. So it's not a bad strategy to do what he's saying, in the sense that if you do those things and you quantify what is affordable in our town, that gives you back a lot more permissibility in your zoning. Because you're not out of compliance with the state law that's been in existence for over 30 years.
Thank you. And just real quick, a
50
lot of the
years.
information we do have,
Yeah.
every month, our building and zoning official gives us a breakdown of the permits. What he doesn't do is include what is affordable and what is not. So like what applications are
Right.
going to be, so that we can easily, pull
That
for
would be
you.
great. That would be so helpful to us, I think, to know like, hey, yeah, they're not like 95% is not affordable. Only 5% is, like, you're not making progress
Counselor Stokes?
at any moment.
So I think you actually hit something really good, and it just occurred to me. So it's been in place 50 years, 30 years, we'll say 30 years.
Whatever.
Doesn't matter.
91.
So I'm looking at this data from Rhode Island Housing, the annual report that we were given tonight. So 8 communities in those 30 years have hit their targets out of 39. So clearly there's a problem there,
Yeah.
and it's not just resistance of communities. It
Yeah.
can't just be communities
Its
don't want to
development
do
is
it.
prioritized for the private sector,
And
profit making, not.
But the other encouraging part about that is, okay, we're trying to strive for this number, that law is in place. Perhaps a better way to look at, or maybe a compromise to get these towns and communities to have that control come back, is to say, well, what is your percentage of working towards it? Meaning, I didn't realize this until it was pointed out tonight. So from 2014 to 2024, Charlestown added 93% towards our number of affordable housing. Meaning we've doubled that percentage in that period of time. You have communities that are at 8%, at 5%. Maybe the percentage of increase towards your number would be a better way to gauge how communities are progressing towards those models. And instead of, hey, you're not a 10, you have no control. No, if you're moving 50% or above in these snapshot periods of time, great. You can pause the brakes, see how you're doing, go
Right.
to the next one.
And certainly you can't have a double standard, right? Like more permissibility for private development for $1 million homes versus permissibility for, so long as you match what you're doing when you're permitting. So you might have had 95% increase, but if you had 300% increase on the market, you're always going to have this delta, right? It's always going to happen.
And just going back to that 93% real quick, so just because everybody doesn't have this document in front of us, so in 2014, we were at 2.06%, and now in 2024, we're at 3.99%. So we're roughly 4% of our goal. So even though it was a 93% increase, we're still at less than 4% of our goal.
Yeah, and in seasonality, we live on the,
Right.
everybody wants to be here. I get it. And even Airbnb, I went and met with the building inspector, and we've issued, not Airbnb, ADUs. I was reading emails about Airbnb. Oh God, that's another thing. But ADUs, you develop some ADUs with the hope that there's some generational living. I know my next door neighbor has one. So it's great. But is it solving our housing crisis? I don't know. I really just don't know, but
Oh,
Counselor Van Slyke and Counselor Stokes.
Yeah.
Well, I guess what I want to do is to transition into Housing 2030. So if you have
I
a
just wanted
comment
to,
first.
I just wanted to hit this number point again. I know you're talking about, your change. And I agree with you, but mathematically, if the town is increasing their low and moderate income housing by 93% and we're doubling even though we're not at 10, we've doubled that. Mathematically, that means you are building more low and moderate income housing comparatively, because even if the town had grown, even if we had a 200% increase in regular market rate houses, it means for that low income housing number to move up, we would have had to put that many more units in.
Yeah.
It's the same reverse math that's not working on these density bonuses,
Yeah.
where we're getting 25%, but 75% of market rate, we're going backwards. So when these percentages are moving from a math standpoint, it's irrelevant what the market rate is doing, because even if I added, like I said, 500% market rate, if this number went up, it means I did that many more physical units of moderate and low income housing to add to
I
that.
agree.
So those numbers, I
Yeah.
think, have to be where we're looking at towns progressing, not this baseline figure.
it sounds to me like Colin has a great solution for you, 100%. Anything he develops, you're gonna get exactly what you need and you're gonna
Agreed.
get those numbers up, so.
Agreed.
But. Counselor-
Okay, well, one of my points is that we have Housing 2030, which is the news.
Let's wrap this one up first. 'cause
Well,
that's the
it's
next one.
going to, the problem that I see is that we have this club, well, kind of just an enforcement mechanism that is trying to enforce something that now Housing 2030 says you only have to do this, but you have that thing hanging over your head anyway. And when they have preliminary hearings, the lawyer comes and says, well, this could be much more dense, And so it's, the comprehensive permits are not helping. But the Housing 2030 says you're free to decide policy changes. They established the goal, but you can work it out yourselves. But then we have this thing hanging over our heads, and it doesn't comport with the land use 2025, the way the housing is supposed to be directed to areas that have jobs and transit and infrastructure. And it doesn't comport with this Housing 2030 to have these comprehensive permits hanging out there. And I don't know the solution. I don't, I really don't,
It's a big
but
problem.
it's a problem.
Yeah. So can I ask you a quick question? When you say it doesn't comport with comprehensive permits are a problem, are you talking about the fact that if you're not in compliance with the 10%, because comp permits have always been comp permits.
They've always been.
So are you suggesting that we should get rid of comp permits?
I'm suggesting that what the comp permits are going to create in Charlestown when we get one is a mishmash and a comprehensive permit in an area that may not be appropriate, that we can't do anything about. So we're getting back to the local control, and it's taken away too much local control,
The comp permit itself, or
the way they're being implemented.
Because
The way the legislature is slowly, not slowly, but quickly
Yeah.
changing how we can deal with those.
okay, so it would be helpful to me to just get the specific, because I think a law that has been in place for 35 years.
It has, but it's changed dramatically in the last 6.
If you could get me like the specific changes that, you see are really changing your ability as a town, I live in Charlestown. I love it here. I don't want it overdeveloped. I want to protect our nature. I want all the things that everybody else probably has expressed here want. But from a real policy, and you all do this, you do ordinances, you do all this technical work all the time. For us to do technical work, and I know the planning board, the individuals have participated in many of the discussions with the attorneys at the State House But in order for us to make real change or make suggestions, like literally specific redlined, like this needs to be extracted, this is what we're proposing. Just like Senator Gu's bill and Representative Cotter's bill, it's really doubling down on what exists at a very high level and being more intentional and specific. Those are the types of things that will help us to carry the ball. But it's a tall order, I'll warn you.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so that we can work on for you.
Okay.
We'll enlist the aid of our planner on that one.
Yeah.
And we'll have a resolution for you.
Yeah, maybe less tall as, 9, 10, 12, 15 communities start to get involved.
That's right.
I think it starts to tip the balance to say, hey, this is being echoed in various places that should move the needle, because if it doesn't move the needle, then that's a problem as well.
Okay, so we can put a resolution regarding this item on the April 13th agenda for vote. Thank you, Representative Spears. All right, the last one we had is consideration of the recent adoption of the Housing 2030 as an element in the state guide plan that assigns a housing production goal for each of the 39 cities and towns based on their potential for new housing growth. So this begins on packet page 67 is the Executive Office of Housing memo, and then the plan itself begins on packet page 70. So who would like to begin on this one? Counselor Grassley, did you want to begin on this one?
Sure. What we see in the Housing 2030, that with currently 5,381 units, our 5-year production goal is 108, or an annual 22 units a year.
This shows 16.
No, that's a 5-year goal, divide by 5. So you get 22 units overall production. Now, the one thing to understand is that this isn't just still about affordable housing. The state wants market housing as well. So that this thing has just exploded from affordable housing to a lot of housing. But they are saying that we should be able in 5 years to produce 108 units of housing, of which 16 of those would be affordable, or annually we would produce 22 units, which we actually probably are doing, and 3.2 of those would be affordable. That's something we can deal with if we don't have a development that comes in with 50 units. So that's what housing is. So housing is 2030. It gives a goal for overall production and a goal for the production of affordable homes. There are 2 components to it. They say in the housing, the plan, municipalities will be free to decide what local policy changes are needed to help them achieve their goals. This plan entrusts and supports local decision makers to address these issues. This flies in the face of comprehensive permits, which tell us what we have to do. So not only does the comprehensive permit, which is part of the Affordable Housing Act, direct housing to places where other state guide plans say it shouldn't be, to rural communities rather than those that have the facilities. It also, there's a problem with trying to achieve these goals. And I'd like to talk about what we could as a town do to produce the 3.2 units a year. Would be something like an mandatory inclusionary zoning ordinance, which I would like to propose that we do. And this shows that the Department of Housing, that we're working towards these goals, but it's not enough. They still keep in place, what is still kept in place is this enforcement mechanism that is causing us huge amounts of trouble, or will.
Yeah, what you said about the percentage of affordable housing, that goes to the point that we made under our first discussion there with regards to looking at the percentage required for the density bonuses and stuff. It all kind of plays in, like if, as Counselor Stokes said at the very beginning, if we just play by their rules, we could continually be moving backwards rather than
Yes,
forwards
right.
with meeting our goal. And it's all a consistent theme throughout these items on the agenda, that this is all part of the problem that we need to ask our senators and reps to work on addressing. Mr. Henry, did you have something you'd like to add on that?
Yes, thank you. I've had some time with Housing 2030, this came out probably a month ago, last year.
It was adapted in December, I think. Yeah.
I saw a draft last summer. I just want to state how the idea of a housing production target or goal, or that a municipality is responsible for producing a certain number of units. I have no issue with the quantity that they propose, 15,000. I think that under current conditions in 5 years, the state would produce 15,000 units. So I don't think that the target itself is unattainable, but as a municipality, we're the entity that's responsible for reviewing these projects and approving them. We don't produce these projects. We
Okay.
have to rely on private developers, private landowners to sign applications affirmatively submitting their land for review under our subdivision regulations and all the regulations and comprehensive permit applications and all those things, all those tools that are available to them. Nobody is forced to do that. It's a free market economy. It's a housing market. And I've been unconvinced by this whole model. They didn't run this by the municipalities, unsurprisingly. We are not actors in that market. We do not produce applications. I do not produce applications. I am beholden to the private sector for someone to come in as a landowner who has private property rights. We are not going to be able to at least my understanding of the laws as they currently exist, we cannot designate certain parcels to be indicated for development because that owner of that parcel has private property rights that they get to determine what happens to that parcel. So I don't think that this model, I'm not very convinced that this is a workable model. It's a great planning document, but I don't know how the town can be held responsible for either a lack of or a certain quantity of housing units to be produced because we're completely beholden to the private sector and for individuals to submit for applications for development. So I just wanted to reiterate that this is a very new idea in this state. I have a lot of questions about it. And it's not exactly connected to the comprehensive permit process because that's how we get the affordable units. This does talk about affordable units, but in our town right now, we don't have an inclusionary zoning ordinance. So the only way to introduce or induce new affordable units that count under the act is through comprehensive permit. That is the only tool by which the town currently has to create those units. And again, we have to wait, or we can help procure to the extent that we can through economic development and, adapting regulations that are pro-housing. But we don't have mechanisms to induce applications. So in areas that have a number of applications coming in, great, they can probably hit those targets, no problem. I don't know from where these applications may come. So I'm leery of this whole model. I just want to get that out there that at this high level, housing production targets is new and it's pretty much completely out of our control.
Thank you.
How do you feel about mandatory inclusionary zoning? Would that help?
It depends how implemented. I think the state kind of changed the law on that
There's some problems with the law.
in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And I think Senator Gu's observation that you need an attorney to help understand this stuff.
Right.
It changes a lot.
Well,
And
it was,
Let him-
I don't know if I could even accurately describe the changes that were made that fouled up the process, but yes, we had to repeal our inclusionary
Right.
zoning as a result of those changes.
Right, 'cause
As did other communities.
it was a law, then they totally made it weird. Now it's come back. It's still, causes, if you need to have 15% of the units be affordable. Well, if you have 7 units, it forces the developer to produce more than 15%. So there's still some problems with it, but it's better than it was before.
And it provides a more piecemeal way to
Right.
attain those units as opposed to large chunks with comprehensive permit.
Right.
Larger chunks. So I think it's a good model.
Mhm.
But I don't know if locally, if we can enact that ordinance under current state law conditions.
We'll check on that, yeah.
Thank you.
That's all. And just one other observation about this plan. I've noted this. There is no mention of regulatory reform at the state. This plan, I think, lays much of the problem at the feet of municipal zoning ordinances. Again, despite amending it several times over the past several sessions, municipal zoning ordinances remain the boogeyman according to this plan. No mention of environmental regulation, no mention of how long it takes to get through DEM, CRMC. People can come in and submit an application to us, we'll turn around in a matter of weeks. And then it will go up to the state, to DEM for 18 months to 24 months. No mention of that in here. So there are issues that are, I think, within the state's control that they could address executively, which isn't to say anything negative about DEM. They're understaffed relative to past levels, and they have a lot of work to do. It's important, and everybody values environmental protection in this state. That's why we live here. We value that quality of life. So nobody wants to cut corners in the environmental review. However, there's no mention of those issues in this plan. So I'm not a fan of this plan.
Thank you. Representative, oh, yep, yes.
Hi, Sri Jackson. I'm by no means an expert in housing and stuff like that, but I think I bring a little bit of expertise to the panel, being a surveyor and engineer in the town and stuff like that. I just wanted to point out a few like brainstorm ideas, just so that they become talking points, One with the growth of 2030, I myself don't want to see the densities happen and stuff like that, but I think we do have opportunities in the town for some denser areas and stuff like that. We have, one of the scenarios would be many of the dogleg lots that we have left over from the 80s, when zoning went over the top of them and stuff like that, that are like unbuildable, but they're 10 and 12 acres and stuff like that. And most of them can only get a comp permit to get them buildable, So why are we not looking at potentially rezoning them or coming up with something to say, hey, let's get the private local guy in here to say, hey, I want to build 3 houses, one for my son, one for my daughter, and I'm going to build here, stuff like that, The residential compound ordinances, I think, needs to be reviewed a little bit, so that we can match some of that, why is it that we can't, I understand affordable housing from the point of the low moderate and the Habitats for Humanities and all of that, but for example, I'm a small business owner, have 4 employees, all under the age of 40. They're either living or helping or doing something with parents. They can't get on their own. So if we don't open up our zoning a little bit to allow them to build more affordable, to put the supply, to bring the prices down, we're never going to have our kids and our young ones working in town, in my opinion. So I just think we have an opportunity to potentially even look at our zoning with our 2-acre and 3-acre zoning. I think we're finally feeling the effects of, we had the 30s and the 40s where we had 50 by 100 lots everywhere, right? Then the 60s came around and we started getting these 1 acres. Everybody wanted to expand their elbows and stuff like that. Then we had overdevelopment. And here come the 80s, right? And what do they say? Whoa, 2-acre, 3-acre, 5-acre zone and spread this out. This is over happening too much, I think we're just feeling that was too big. And that perhaps we've got to look at some of our zoning and say, if we don't want this down in the South Shore, because we don't want it in the South Shore, we want our ponds, we want to keep why we love this place, keep the nitrates low and stuff like that. But I think we've got other areas of the town that are potentially, zone 2 and 3, and maybe they need to be 1 acre. Maybe they need to be half an acre. I don't know what that is, but I think when we talk about the affordable housing and this growth that we're doing, I hope that we're responsible to think of not only the people that, really need it, but there's also these middle people. And the other thing I want to bring more of a question, because I don't understand it, to the legislatures and stuff like that. Is there a mechanism it's difficult for somebody to say, you've owned a, 10, 15 acre parcel for a couple generations, and you want to break off a lot for your kid. And then the density bonus says, yeah, but you got to have this so much low income, right? Well, even if that person may qualify for that low income, do they not still have to be part of a program? Do they still not have to then qualify at some respect? And then they can't put the equity back into that place? So I think you guys brought up a good point that we're also starting to see that the affordable housing model in the 90s isn't working either. I kind of like the idea of the open space, part open space, 10 years, kind of town controlled, kind of like, hey, I'm a family growing, but I'm also might be retiring. I'm willing to put this in for 10 years till my kids get out of college, get on their own. But then at 10 years, all right, I got room for my family to move in, stuff like that, So I think we have to start thinking outside the box. I agree, it's coming way too fast. We got to slow down the brakes and stuff like that. But I also think internally, we can do some things to promote better housing in the town, and I'd just like to see that.
Thank you. Representative Spears?
Yeah, I'll just build on what she was saying, and I just want to put on the record, this is, that housing plan is not a product of the General Assembly. That is a product of the administration, right? So that's the Department of Housing. They're the ones the Executive Office of Housing, they're the ones who produce that. And when you're deliberating on resolutions, if you can get us a resolution to give it to the Executive Office to say, include local town questions and observations and questions, that would be helpful to us. And just to build on this young woman's comments, yeah, more ideas and solutions. Like if you say the town wants to do X, Y, and Z, somehow state law prohibits it, and you want us to create something new that you're going to do that's innovative and, the next generation of affordability and what you're going to do for the working class in Charlestown, I speak for myself, but I'm sure Senator Gu and I would be happy to take it up.
Thank you. That's
Yeah, sure.
yeah, and I got Senator.
Senator, up to you.
I'm gonna keep it quick. So to add to what Rep. Spears was saying and previous speaker was saying, the town doesn't have to be a passive in terms of the growth and the affordable units coming in. You have a nonprofit developer, who's sitting here for multiple hours wanting to be a part of it. And you have a lot of towns that are looking at their town-owned lands and inviting local developers, nonprofit or not, to help them do development that is more in line with what the town wants. And then as far as the Councilor Van Slyke's question about how the state plan integrates with the comp permit. So this is a part of existing law, but if you look at Rhode Island general law, is it scrolling up to find it? It's under the comp permit law, like 45-53
or something,
-4. And you look at required findings for denial. So the first line is, in reviewing the comp permit request, the local review board may deny the request for any of the following reasons. And number one is if the city or town has an approved affordable housing plan and it's meeting local housing needs, and the proposal is inconsistent with the affordable housing plan, provided that the local review board also finds that the town has made significant progress in implementing that housing plan. I think there is sort of a check and balance there of like, if you do have an approved plan and you are making progress year over year on that plan, then you do have one reason for denying a comp permit request. And as part of the state housing plan that we're talking about, Housing 2030, the additional thing that worked on with the Secretary of Housing is the Housing Champions Bill, which is they saw as part of this is rewarding towns that are making some progress on their affordable housing. or setting up things that would encourage affordable housing, like investing in infrastructure capacity. And the reward would be preferential access to state funds, which would help in any number of instances in terms of continuing positive progress. So I don't think the regulations have come out for that yet, but I just want to mention it as part of the overall picture of the Housing 2030 plan.
What would be determine significant progress? How would we show that?
It's not really defined in this law. The Housing 2030, I think, is a first step in maybe outlining that, because I know they have the targets of 0.4% over 5 years for Charlestown, a continued growth community, which is on the lower tier of housing growth.
108.
Over 5 years, they would permit on average housing units equal to 0.4% of their existing housing stock. So, I mean, there has to be maybe some change, or we have to somehow figure out, is this, like, make sure we integrate this plan into the state law that I just mentioned.
Well, what I'm hearing is if we do 0.4%, and we have to figure out a way to do that, then we can show that we're making significant progress. But
yes, under existing law, if you have an approved affordable housing plan and are making significant progress, then that is.
But that doesn't exempt us from comprehensive permits coming in.
No, that is part of the comprehensive permit law.
Yeah.
It is one of the possible reasons for denial.
Yeah, you could deny it, but you can't. All right.
And I just want to say, I thought I just heard you say that we could incorporate that plan and make it state law, but what I'm hearing from our planner and based on what's in the report, we don't want this plan to be part of state law. I mean, am I not hearing that correctly? Like, there are problems within this plan that we don't want to see in state law.
Well,
Yeah, Mr. Henry?
yeah.
Not really.
I just, as Council Vince like already said, it's already been voted and added to the state. It's not a law, it's now been added to the state guide plan. So we have our local comprehensive plan, which guides local actions for the community. And the state, as long as we have an approved and valid comprehensive plan, the state action must follow as well.
Right.
Our comprehensive plans have to be in conformance with the state guide plan, which is basically the state version of the comprehensive plan, for which a number of elements have been added over the years, and this is the most recent one that has already been added in December to the state guide plan element. So it's been adopted. We already have, I have issues with the premise of it. I don't understand how mechanically it works, and we're going to find out.
Right, but the issue is it's part of the guide plan, but this is not like statute law where you
No.
can refer to, 45 dash whatever. So it's not law in the sense that you need to follow, the laws as written in other sections. It's more of like a guide.
Correct.
Rather than law. So
And-
there is a distinction.
Well, and most importantly, as now the state guide plan element, our future comprehensive plan amendments, adoptions, whatever version we adopt in the future at the next, whenever our next expiration is, I think, next year, 2027, we will have to conform with that new housing plan. We'll have to figure out how to make our comprehensive plan conform with what that says. And it's, some of these things, just mechanically how they work are not clear to me, but we will have to figure it out. It's already been done, so we'll have to figure out when it happens.
Right. Anybody else on this one? Yes,
So
a name for the record.
that's Ruth Plattner. We are meeting the 5-year production goal and have been for the last 20 years. In fact, the number they picked, 0.4% of our total housing, this isn't year-round housing, we have done about 20 units per year. And so we're doing much more than that the last few years. So we will meet or exceed this. And so it's a reasonable goal for Charlestown. Also, what they're saying is as you produce housing, a certain percentage of that should be affordable. And what Bonnie suggested, mandatory inclusionary zoning is a way to mandate that. So there are some small problems still with the law, but not terrible. So I think that there's a lot of negativity about this. And it's not a law, but it's an easier goal than comp permit, because you don't know what that is. You don't know when it's coming, but it's always hanging over. And so I think my message to the legislators is that even though this plan isn't perfect, the state housing plan, at least it's a plan, and it's not, it's something that the community tries to figure out how to do. And so all these ideas for ways you can make affordable housing, we can do all those things. And until we reach 10%, someone can still come in with a really destructive permit in terms of density. The real problem, the big problem, I think, with the law is the density that was included of 3 units per acre. Because on our right on top of the aquifer, it's the biggest density increase. It goes from 1 unit to 10 per lot. There were some things said that weren't true before that I just have to say. We denied an application in the year 2000. It had no affordable component. We denied the Dollar General. Those are the only 2 denials that I know of. And things like Vinegar Hamlet, that was defeated by CRMC rules. I don't even remember if it was before the planning commission. It was before the town council mostly. So.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say this real quick. I don't think what Mr. Penny said was they were all denials. I think he said the process was so difficult that they couldn't even get through.
No,
And
he said
I'm
denials.
not, we're not gonna like bicker back and forth all night, but I mean, I think we all know there have been issues, where plans don't get approved, or they get approved with such conditions that are so onerous where the applicant walks away, because then it either becomes unaffordable for them to do, or there are other roadblocks that are thrown up. So I mean, this has been one of the problems in Charlestown over the years, where we've lost affordable housing proposals that could have added to our stock because of provisions that were put in that were too onerous, that made it not feasible to do. So, there's things. Yeah.
But if you're gonna.
Right, and we're not gonna, like I said, get back into it, but I don't wanna say that, that his statements weren't true, that there weren't roadblocks that were put up that made them walk away. So we can, we're gonna get information on that going forward, so we can debate that, at another time.
Fine.
Mr. Gunny, then we're gonna wrap this up because it's 8:45.
Couple of things. If you go in here on page 89 of your packet, under the 30-year 2030 plan, you will notice all of these units expiring.
Yeah.
The General Assembly did not think in 1991, 92, 93, 95, and onward that they would have this problem. Over the next 30 years, there will be 18,561 units that are now affordable deed restricted that will be market rate. So hence the 15,000. Also, care to guess what the population of Rhode Island has been in the last 20 years? Up, down, level?
Down.
Really?
Probably down.
Oh, really?
Down, 50,000. You have 50,000 less Rhode Islanders over the last 20 years than you do today. So it's again, facts are stubborn things. So I'm trying to reconcile 15,000 units, 50,000 Rhode Islanders. Not really sure what's going to happen in the future. But the 2030 goal, I was struck the same way. I couldn't agree with your planner more. The 22 units in Westerly, just for clarification, were fully approved by the planning board. Private citizens took exception to that, but I made the motion to approve, and you had our full support because it was a good project. It was a good project, it was a solid project, and we're in favor of it. With regard to comprehensive plan and inclusionary zoning, I happened to print off tonight, if I might approach,
Yes.
affordable housing. So this is in Westerly. I would strongly encourage you, again, they're rolling off 30 years, right? Deed restriction. Westerly's had 99-year deed restrictions from the beginning. We're not on that sheet. Our percentages are not gonna drop. Everyone else's percentages are gonna drop. And then potentially there will be movement afoot to put pressure on towns and saying, you're not making your 10% goal. It's the definition of insanity. We keep doing the same things over and over, and we expect the results to be different. 35 years, it's about performance, it's about effectiveness, and then it has to be about adaptability and flexibility. I would ask you to call on your representatives to have a statewide, 39 cities and towns, get their planning departments, get their planning board representatives in there, and get some town council representatives to meet with the legislators to talk about it, because the situation is different for each and every town. It's different for Jamestown than it is for Westerly. It's different for that. The one size fits all. I couldn't agree with Senator Gu more. You can deny under existing law. They're up there with Etch-a-Sketch on certain sections of the law. There are proposals before you in certain sections of the law that's going to change whether what happened previously in the past, the deniability is still there.
Run that by again.
No,
Would you say that again? I didn't.
sure. Right now, Senator Gu is absolutely correct. Under existing law, that is correct. My solicitor for planning and zoning, I asked him, if some of these laws pass, what does that mean? He said, well, if you had another Winnapock project, you'd have a serious problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so what the legislature, and so the legislature has to understand that, you know, the state of Rhode Island, DOT, was sued by EPA for stormwater. The General Assembly allocates funds every single year to help resolve that situation because stormwater was causing a problem through drainage into the rivers and streams in the state of Rhode Island. We were sued by the federal government. So it's this intersection of environment, safety, drinking water, you know,
And we have the health of the salt ponds and
the health of the salt ponds, and you have to think, okay, now, yes, you can add it. But look at page 89. 30 years in the future after that, are they gonna have to do it? Are we constantly on this kind of hamster wheel? We really need solid solutions, and we're not the smartest people, like, on the planet. We're just not. But I guarantee if you put 39 cities and towns, you put their planners together, you put their planning board chairs and vice chairs in there, you put members of their council in there, and you work with the General Assembly, you might get to someplace better. But increasing the goal and having a goal that has failed, that has consistently failed, because in comes not the Mr. Petties who are here with Habitat that are doing an absolute perfect thing for our communities, but they don't have the building capacity. They need help.
Thank you.
At the end of the day, we have to take care of the folks that are here, and we also have to realize we're stewards for the future residents of Charlestown, Westerly, and Rhode Island.
Thank you. Okay, so we have had a good productive conversation on all this. We can also put this item on the agenda for the 13th and perhaps do a resolution with regards to this plan 2030 going forward. All right, anyone else? All right, then do we have a motion from the council to adjourn?
Should do, sure.
Motion from Council Mark.
Second.
Second from Council Van Slyke. All those in favor say
Aye.
aye. Meeting adjourned at 8:46.
And I'm gonna give this